Welcome, dear listener, to Whispers of the Night. I'm so glad you've joined me here, in this quiet corner where stories and dreams intertwine. Tonight, we'll journey together into a tale woven with the soft magic of Twilight, a gentle story called The Tree That Sang at Twilight. Here, beneath fading skies and whispering branches, we'll listen to a song that drifts across time, carrying hope, memory, and the comfort of companionship. If you're new here, I invite you to subscribe to Whispers of the Night. Each evening, I share calm, soothing bedtime stories and gentle narrations to help you drift into rest. By subscribing, you'll always have a quiet place to return to whenever the world feels a little too loud. So settle in, allow yourself to pause and breathe. This is your time, a gift of stillness at the end of the day. Let the twilight open softly around you as we step into tonight's story together. Before our story begins, let's take a little time to let go of the day and prepare our minds and bodies for rest. Find a comfortable position, whether you are lying in bed or resting in a quiet space. Gently close your eyes if you'd like, and begin by noticing the rhythm of your breath. There's no need to change it. Just allow yourself to become aware of the gentle rise and fall. Like soft waves on a calm shore, inhale slowly, letting your lungs fill with ease, and exhale gently, releasing the weight of the day. With every breath, imagine you are drawing in a sense of quiet and letting go of anything that no longer serves you. As your body begins to relax, notice how the air feels around you, cool, soft, and steady, almost like twilight settling across the earth. Picture the warmth of the day fading, replaced by the hush of evening. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the sky glows with tender shades of rose, lavender, and fading gold. Now, imagine yourself walking along a forest path. The ground beneath your feet is soft, scattered with moss and leaves. You hear the gentle hum of crickets, the faint call of a bird settling into its nest, and the rustle of branches as they sway in the evening breeze. With each step, you feel lighter, your shoulders ease, your jaw softens, and the small tensions you've carried throughout the day simply melt away as twilight deepens. Tiny fireflies begin to dance around you, their golden lights flickering like stars come to earth. The forest is calm, yet alive, filled with a gentle rhythm that seems to move in harmony with your breath. In the distance, you see the outline of a great tree. Its trunk is wide, strong, and ancient, and its branches reach high into the sky, as though they are touching the fading light of the evening. There's a glow around it, faint but steady, as though the tree itself is alive with a secret. As you approach, you feel safe, welcomed, and at peace. You take a seat beneath its branches, resting against its roots. The earth here is soft, cradling you with comfort, and you realize that this is a place where you can let go fully, where you can rest deeply. knowing you are held by the quiet strength of the forest. With each breath, you sink deeper into relaxation, your body heavy and calm, your mind softening into stillness. And here, beneath the tree at twilight, you are ready to listen, ready to dream, ready to hear the story that awaits. The tree that sang at twilight, the whisper in the leaves, the forest at twilight held a quiet magic that few noticed. Yet Lyanna had always felt it in her bones. Even as a child, she had wandered the edges of the trees, listening to the way shadows stretched long and the wind whispered through the branches. But tonight, the forest seemed different alive, with an expectancy she could not name. The path beneath her feet was soft with fallen leaves, their crisp edges brushing against one another as she walked. Each step stirred tiny clouds of dust, and the subtle scent of moss and damp earth rose to meet her, thick and sweet, wrapping her in a sense of otherworldly calm. Lyanna's fingers brushed along the trunks of familiar trees as she ventured deeper, tracing the grooves of bark worn by centuries of sun, rain, and wind. The forest floor seemed to hum faintly beneath her shoes, as if it remembered every creature that had passed this way. Twilight filtered through the canopy in streams of amber and violet, setting the leaves ablaze in colors that seemed almost unreal. She paused for a moment, inhaling the damp, musky air and exhaling slowly, letting herself become part of the forest. The edges of the world felt softer here, the boundaries between reality and imagination less certain. It was then she heard it, a sound almost too subtle to define, yet impossibly distinct. A melody, as if the wind itself had learned to sing. It fluttered through the branches, rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed both deliberate and impossibly free. Lyanna froze, her heart catching in her chest. The sound was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was not a bird, not an insect, nor the soft trickle of water. It was something older, something alive in a way that pulsed deeper than the forest floor, drawn toward it. Lyanna followed the sound through winding paths where shadows stretched and folded, obscuring the familiar. The trees seemed to part slightly as she moved, creating an invisible corridor that beckoned her onward. Every so often, the wind carried a note, a delicate chord that seemed to resonate directly with her thoughts. And she found herself walking faster, though cautiously. Drawn by curiosity, she could no longer resist. The melody grew clearer, richer, and more intricate. There were undertones of warmth, of laughter, and an echo of sorrow that twisted gently beneath it. Lyanna's fingers tingled as though in response to the music, and she realized she was trembling not from cold, though the air was already crisp, but from something deeper, a sense of awe that filled her chest and stretched out to her fingertips. She had entered a space where time itself seemed to hesitate, where the ordinary laws of the world softened, leaving only the immediacy of sound and the subtle glow of the encroaching night through the dimming light. She saw it, a tree unlike any she had known, towering above its neighbors with a presence that seemed almost regal. Its trunk was wide, gnarled with age, its bark etched with patterns that suggested movement, as if the lines themselves had been carved by countless unseen hands over centuries. The leaves shimmered faintly, catching the last rays of sun in a way that made them appear luminous, like delicate lanterns strung across the branches. The melody she had been following seemed to originate here, radiating outward in gentle pulses that mingled with the twilight air. Lyanna approached slowly, hesitant to disturb what felt like a sacred moment. The closer she drew, the more she realized that the tree itself seemed to be breathing, its branches swaying with a rhythm that matched the music. It was alive in ways she could feel beneath her skin, a living symphony composed of bark, leaf, and light. She reached out a tentative hand to touch the trunk, and as her fingers made contact, a warmth spread from the point of contact up her arm, as if the tree had acknowledged her presence. The melody shifted, softening into a lullaby that seemed to speak directly to her, to the quiet spaces inside her mind that had long gone unspoken. For a long while, she stood there in silence, letting the music wash over her. Each note felt as though it carried a memory, a fragment of time captured in the rustling of leaves and the faint glow of the tree. She imagined the lives that had passed through this forest, the countless seasons that had shaped the soil, the air, and the water. And in that imagining, she sensed that this tree had been a witness to it all, a keeper of moments too subtle to be recorded elsewhere. Her heart swelled with a reverence she could barely articulate. The twilight deepened, and with it, the glow of the tree intensified, outlining the contours of its massive trunk and casting long shadows across the mossy ground. Lyanna knelt at its base, her palms resting on the soft earth, and felt a connection that stretched beyond understanding. It was as if the tree had chosen her to hear its song, to recognize its presence at this precise hour when the day folded into night. She closed her eyes, letting the harmony guide her thoughts into a calmness she had never known. It was not simply the absence of worry or fear, it was the presence of something greater, a silent reassurance that she was part of a vast, interwoven tapestry. Minutes or perhaps hours passed in this state of quiet communion. The melody continued its gentle course, rising and falling with an organic inevitability, never repeating, yet never chaotic. Lyanna felt her own heartbeat begin to synchronize with the rhythm, as though she were slowly becoming an instrument in the tree's endless song. Every breath she took was drawn with a deeper awareness. Every exhale released a tension she had carried unknowingly. The forest around her seemed to lean in, listening, and she realized with a thrill that she was no longer alone in her wonder. A sudden flicker of light drew her eyes upward, and she saw tiny motes hovering above the branches, catching the tree's glow like fragments of captured starlight. They danced in delicate arcs, weaving through the leaves, and for a moment, Lyanna felt as though she had stepped into a dream. The music shifted subtly again, gentle chords of anticipation threading through the air, as if the tree was preparing to share something more. And then she noticed the patterns in the bark, the swirls and knots forming symbols that seemed almost familiar, like letters or runes in a language she could almost remember, but not quite speak. A breeze rustled through the upper branches, carrying a whisper that she could feel as much as hear. It was not a voice, exactly, but a sensation, a suggestion of meaning that brushed her consciousness lightly. She sensed stories within the tree, hidden within its rings and leaf-stales, of seasons long past, of storms weathered and sunlit mornings, of creatures that had rested beneath its boughs. Each rustle was a phrase, each flicker of light, a punctuation in an eternal narrative that was both intimate and immense. Lyanna's imagination took flight, filling in the details the tree left open, and she realized she was participating in its song, co-creating the melody with every thought, every sensation. The first stars appeared in the sky, delicate points of silver scattered across the deepening blue. Their reflection in the tree's leaves created a shimmer that seemed almost like movement, a silent dance echoing the melody beneath. Lyanna tilted her head, feeling the weight of wonder settle deep in her chest. She realized that this moment, this twilight communion, was one she would carry forever, a memory carved as surely as the tree's ancient grooves. The forest around her was now a soft blur of shadow and light, yet the song of the tree kept her anchored, a thread running from the ground beneath her feet to the canopy above and beyond, into the night. Eventually, a sense of gentle closure settled over her. The melody tapered, not ending but softening, like a sigh that passes through the leaves. The tree's glow dimmed to a gentle shimmer, leaving her with the warmth of remembered light. Lyanna stood slowly, brushing leaves from her sleeves, and took one last look at the tree. She felt gratitude, deep and ineffable, a recognition that she had been entrusted with something rare and luminous. Her heart was lighter, her senses sharpened, and her mind clearer. The forest no longer felt merely a place of passage, but a living, breathing companion, holding secrets she had glimpsed and connections she could feel as she walked back toward the path leading home. The night deepened fully, and the sounds of the forest shifted. Owls called in distant trees, crickets began their evening chorus, and a soft wind rustled through the undergrowth. Lyanna felt the music still inside her, echoing faintly like a memory of warmth and light. She carried the knowledge that the tree, ancient and eternal, would continue its song, waiting patiently for the next wanderer who would hear it at twilight. And in that awareness, she felt a gentle peace, a sense that the world, vast and infinite, was at once both mysterious and tender, always ready to sing to those who listened. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the last traces of the tree's glow had faded, leaving her with the quiet hum of life in the night. Yet, even as the stars overhead glimmered in solitude, she knew the melody would remain, threaded invisibly through her own being. And as she stepped into the cool, familiar air of the evening beyond the trees, she understood something profound. Some stories are not written in words, but sung in silence, carried on leaves and wind, waiting for ears attuned to the hidden music of the world. The tree's secret song. As twilight deepened, Lyanna returned to the forest, her steps quieter this time, attuned to the subtle rhythm of the evening. The path she had wandered the day before seemed almost to recognize her, the leaves bending slightly under her touch, the moss cushioning her feet as though welcoming her back. She felt a pull in her chest, an insistence to reach the ancient tree again, to hear its song as fully as she could. The air was cooler now, tinged with the scent of damp earth and the faint sweetness of unseen blossoms. Carrying the soft hum of the day's last warmth, she approached the tree slowly, pausing a few feet away, as though not to disturb a being in deep contemplation. Already, it shimmered faintly in the twilight, a subtle pulse of light running through its veins of bark. The glow seemed to awaken as she drew near, as if the tree recognized her presence and began to speak, preparing to share what it had long held in quiet patience. The wind whispered through the branches, lifting a single leaf, carrying it in a lazy spiral, and it seemed to Lyanna that the leaf itself was conducting the music. Then the song began again. It was richer than before, layered in textures she had never known a melody could contain. There were the soft, high notes, delicate as spider silk, weaving through the branches like sunlight through mist. Beneath them, the deeper tones pulsed steadily, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. And threaded throughout were fragments of voices, whispers of lives long past, soft and incomprehensible, yet filled with meaning. The song was not made for her. Alone it had existed for centuries, waiting for someone patient enough to listen, sensitive enough to feel its stories. Lyanna closed her eyes, letting herself fall into the flow. The melody seemed to speak in images rather than words. She saw glimmers of ancient villages, the hum of marketplaces long abandoned, children laughing in sunlight that no longer touched the earth. There were flashes of ceremonies beneath moonlight, the soft ripple of water over stone bridges, the quiet murmur of lovers meeting beneath the branches. Each note carried a memory, a fragment of time preserved within the tree, and as she listened, she felt as though she were touching every moment, her consciousness brushing against history itself. The wind shifted, carrying with it a new layer of sound. It was more urgent now, insistent, yet gentle, a song that urged her to notice details she might have overlooked. She felt the bark beneath her fingertips pulse slightly, like the tree's own awareness responding to her presence. Lyanna rested her head against the trunk, closing her eyes, and in that stillness, she began to perceive the language hidden in the music. It was not spoken, not written, but understood, a language of rhythm and tone, of light and shadow. The tree's memory was vast, stretching back further than any human mind could grasp, yet it spoke in ways that her heart recognized intuitively. Time lost its usual shape as she listened. Minutes became hours, or perhaps the opposite. The world outside the forest ceased to matter. The melody grew more intricate, a symphony composed of the smallest sounds, leaves brushing together, the faint creak of branches, the whisper of roots stretching through the soil. And then, beneath it all, there was a note that was hers alone, as if the tree had been waiting specifically for her. A thread of warmth wound through her chest, weaving her heartbeat into the rhythm of the song. Images came more vividly now. She saw a small boy laughing in a field of golden wheat, a woman kneeling at a river's edge, a bird caught mid-flight as sunlight struck its wings. These images were not memories of people she had known, but they carried a resonance, an echo of lives connected to the earth in ways that transcended time. Lyanna understood, in the most profound sense, that the tree's song was a record of existence, itself a delicate, living chronicle of all that had touched its roots and branches. The melody shifted again, softer now, almost tentative. It invited her closer to listen, and she stepped forward reverently. Light flickered along the bark, tracing patterns she had not noticed before, spirals and rings, knots and grooves that seemed to pulse in time with the music. Lyanna ran her fingers over them, feeling the vibrations travel up her arm, settling deep in her chest. She realized the tree did not just sing. It communicated through touch, through resonance, through the subtle interplay of light and sound. Each vibration carried a fragment of story, each shimmer of illumination, a moment waiting to be discovered. Lyanna's mind filled with questions, yet she felt no urgency to answer them. The tree's song was patient, eternal. It did not demand understanding, only attention. She let herself breathe in its cadence, letting the wind carry away her thoughts of the outside world, of obligations and worries. In the space between notes, she felt a profound calm, a sense of belonging she had never known in human company. The tree's secret song was not a song of humans, but it spoke to something innately human, the capacity to listen, to feel, to remember. A particularly bright shimmer ran along the upper branches, and Lyanna looked up, her eyes tracing the light as it moved. It seemed almost like a pulse, a heartbeat visible to the eye, and in that instant, she felt the presence of every living thing the tree had witnessed. Birds, foxes, deer, insects, each had brushed against the tree, left a mark, and been remembered. The realization struck her like a soft wind through the soul. The tree held stories, not just of people, but of all life. Its song was a song of the forest itself, of the endless cycles of birth, growth, and rest. Lyanna settled herself at the base once more, letting the music flow over her like water. She began to feel the stories differently, now not as images to watch, but as sensations to inhabit. A sense of joy, a pang of loss, the thrill of discovery, the quietude of waiting all passed through her, entwined with the melody. She felt herself expanding, her consciousness stretching to accommodate the enormity of what the tree carried. And within that expansion, she realized something she could not have anticipated. She was no longer merely a listener. She was part of the song. The tree shifted subtly, its branches moving with intention, and a sudden warmth enveloped her. A gentle wind swirled around her, carrying petals from a nearby flowering vine. They floated in the air like tiny lanterns, reflecting the dim glow of the tree. Lyanna reached out, catching one between her fingers, and it felt alive, as if infused with the essence of the forest itself. She understood, without needing explanation, that this was the tree's gifted way of sharing not just stories, but fragments of the life it had witnessed, of the moments it had cherished and preserved. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes before the song softened again, folding in upon itself. The wind stilled, the glowing leaves dimmed, and the forest returned to the quiet hush that marked Twilight's end. Lyanna rose slowly, her body heavy with the weight of the experience, yet lightened by the knowledge she had gained. The tree's secret song had spoken to her in ways words could never capture, leaving a residue of wonder, of connection, and of calm that would linger long after she had left. As she stepped back, preparing to leave, she felt the tree's presence follow her, not as sound or sight, but as a subtle awareness, a gentle pulse in the air around her. She turned once more, committing the image to memory: the glowing bark, the swaying branches, the tiny lights that hovered like starlight caught in the leaves. And she knew with certainty that she would return. The tree had chosen her to hear its song, but the song itself was endless, patient, and eternal. It would wait for her as it had waited for countless others, for anyone willing to listen and to feel. Lyanna walked from the forest with her senses heightened, attuned to the subtle symphony of the world around her. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of wind across the grass, every distant chirp or whispering insect carried with it a faint echo of the tree's song. She realized that even when apart, the melody had woven itself into her being, and in that understanding, she felt a quiet resolve. She would return again and again to listen, to witness, to become part of the song. For she had glimpsed the secret heart of the forest, and it had chosen to share its stories with her. And as night settled fully across the world, Lyanna knew that this was only the beginning. The tree's song was not a single tale, but an infinite tapestry waiting to be explored, understood, and cherished. With each visit, she would uncover new layers, new stories hidden in the rustle of leaves, until she had learned to listen not just with her ears, but with her heart, and to carry the forest's memories into her own life with care and reverence. The Girl Who Listened. Evening. As the sun began its slow descent and twilight spilled across the forest, Lyanna felt the familiar tug in her chest, calling her toward the ancient tree. The path seemed almost too open before her, leaves brushing softly against her legs, guiding her deeper into the shadows and light. She walked in silence, each step measured, attentive, as if the forest itself were speaking in gestures she had only just begun to understand. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, moss, and the subtle perfume of unseen flowers, carrying with it the quiet promise of discovery. When she reached the tree, a gentle glow pulsed along its bark, faint at first, like the slow opening of an eye. Lyanna approached reverently, her fingers brushing the grooves in the ancient trunk, tracing the patterns carved by countless seasons. The tree seemed to hum beneath her touch, a low vibration that settled deep in her chest. It was a sound she had learned to feel as much as hear, a resonance that spoke to something older than words, older even than memory. She sat down on the mossy ground at its base, folding her legs beneath her and letting her hands rest lightly on the earth. The melody began again, rising in delicate waves that wove through the branches, the wind, and the fading light. It was richer than ever, layered with subtleties she had not noticed before. There were notes that shimmered like dew on spider silk, low tones that vibrated like the beating of the earth, and hidden fragments of laughter, sorrow, and wonder that slipped through her mind with quiet insistence. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her, and for a moment the forest and she became one. Each leaf, each branch, each whisper of wind, a thread in a vast, living tapestry. Lyanna began to notice the meanings hidden in the music. It was not merely a song, but a language, subtle and profound, teaching lessons that could not be captured in words alone. There was patience in the slow swell of the chords, a gentle insistence to wait, to observe, to breathe. She realized that the tree had been singing these lessons for centuries, that it had witnessed lives beginning and ending, storms passing, blossoms opening, and rivers flowing, all without haste or complaint. The song carried the quiet power of endurance, of being fully present and wholly attentive to the world. In the flickering twilight, Lyanna felt a lesson in kindness. The melody shifted, softening, curling around her like a warm breath. She sensed the compassion of the tree, the way it held space for every creature that had ever sought shelter beneath its boughs. She felt the echoes of those who had come before her, wanderers, dreamers, lost children, and silent witnesses of the forest. Each had been welcomed by the tree's patience, and now she too was embraced. The music suggested that kindness was not always action. Sometimes it was presence, attentiveness, and the quiet acknowledgement of another's existence. Lyanna's chest swelled with a tender understanding, a desire to carry this lesson with her beyond the forest's edge. The wind stirred the branches above, and a single leaf spiraled down, landing softly in her lap. It shimmered faintly, catching the last light of the day, and she held it carefully between her fingers. The leaf seemed to pulse with meaning, as though it were a message meant just for her. In that moment, she realized that listening was more than hearing. It was receiving, accepting, and understanding the messages woven into the world's quiet fabric. The tree's song taught her that true listening required an open heart, patience, and the willingness to let the world speak on its own terms. Lyanna returned night after night, each visit deepening her understanding. She learned to recognize the nuances in the melody, the subtle shifts in tone that signaled different lessons or stories. Sometimes the music spoke of gentle rain falling on distant hills, the hush of rivers under moonlight, or the rustle of hidden creatures stirring in the underbrush. At other times, it carried the echoes of human lives, moments of joy, sorrow, triumph, and loss, all preserved within the tree's ancient memory. She began to notice patterns, repetitions that were not mere duplication but emphasis, guiding her attention toward the truths the tree deemed most important. With each evening, Lyanna felt herself changing. Her steps became quieter, more deliberate, her thoughts more measured, more attuned to the subtleties of the world around her. She noticed the small acts of care in the forest, a bird tending its nest, a fox pausing to sniff the wind, a flower opening to catch the faintest glimmer of sunlight. She saw that these acts were not separate from the greater rhythm of life, but integral to it, and that the tree's song celebrated these connections. Listening became an act of reverence, a way of acknowledging the delicate interweaving of existence, and she felt honored to partake in it. As the melody swirled through the branches, Lyanna found herself swept into visions. She saw children laughing in fields of gold, families huddled around fires in long-vanished villages, and solitary travelers wandering paths that no longer existed. She felt their emotions, joy, fear, longing, and hope as if they were her own, yet simultaneously recognized that she was merely a conduit, receiving the echoes of lives preserved in the tree's memory. It was a humbling experience, and each time she opened her eyes, she carried a fragment of those stories with her, woven into the fabric of her own understanding. One evening, a gentle rain began to fall, fine droplets that kissed her skin and the leaves above. The tree's song adapted, weaving the patter of water into its melody, creating a symphony of sound and sensation. Lyanna felt the music resonate with her very bones, vibrating in harmony with the rain and the quiet murmurs of the forest. She laughed softly, a sound that mingled with the melody, and felt the joy of being fully present, entirely attuned to the moment. In that laughter, she realized that listening was not only a passive act, but an active engagement, a dance between her own awareness and the world's expression. The days passed, and Lyanna found herself carrying the lessons of the tree beyond the forest. She began to notice the subtleties of life in her own village, the way neighbors moved with unspoken rhythm, the quiet gestures of care that often went unnoticed, the unremarked patterns of nature in gardens and streets. She applied the patience she had learned, the kindness the tree had modeled, and the deep attentiveness to the hidden music of existence. Though the village did not sing in the same literal way as the tree, she found that its own rhythms became more audible to her, more meaningful, more alive. Lyanna's visits to the tree became ritual, a sacred act that structured her days. Each evening, she made her way through the forest, greeted the familiar moss-covered stones, and rested beneath the glowing branches. And each night, the tree responded with melodies that were increasingly intricate, increasingly personal, as if it recognized her growth and her dedication. Sometimes the music was soft, a lullaby for reflection. Other times, it rose in a joyous crescendo, celebrating the vitality of life itself. The tree's song taught her to balance attentiveness with wonder, action with patience, and understanding with humility. Through these evenings, she discovered that listening was not merely a skill, but a form of presence, a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. She realized that every leaf, every breeze, every drop of rain carried a story waiting to be noticed, and that the act of listening could unlock understanding not just of the forest, but of life itself. The tree's song became a mirror to her own soul, reflecting back the truths she had overlooked, the quiet lessons embedded in moments too fleeting to remember unless one truly attended to them. And so, Lyanna became known in the village as the girl who listened not only to the wind and the trees, but to the people, the animals, the streams, and the countless subtle vibrations of the world. She spoke less, but when she did, her words were thoughtful, resonant, carrying the weight of understanding she had cultivated beneath the tree's ancient branches. People felt heard in her presence, even when she said nothing, because she had learned the art of attending fully, of listening with the heart rather than the ears alone. Nights merged into weeks, weeks into months, and still Lyanna returned. The tree continued to sing, and she continued to listen, her awareness deepening with every visit. She began to notice connections between the melodies, threads that tied distant stories together, resonances that hinted at lessons too complex for a single night to convey. And in her quiet, consistent attention, she felt herself becoming part of the forest's memory, a keeper in her own right, preserving the melodies in her own heart so they could ripple outward into the lives of others. One evening, as the moon rose high and bathed the forest in silver light, Lyanna leaned against the trunk of the ancient tree and let the music envelop her. She felt the full weight of what she had learned: patience, kindness, attentiveness, reverence, and the profound importance of listening. She understood that these lessons were not to be confined to the forest, but to be carried into every corner of life, shaping not only her own journey, but the experiences of those around her. The tree's song was not merely a melody. It was a teacher, a guide, a mirror, and a companion, offering wisdom to anyone willing to hear. And as she sat beneath the glowing branches, feeling the pulse of the tree and the rhythm of the forest, Lyanna knew that she would continue to listen for the rest of her life. She had become a conduit for the world's quiet stories, a guardian of lessons too subtle for words, and a witness to the eternal song of life. In that twilight space between the fading light and the encroaching night, she felt the profound harmony of being fully alive, fully attentive, and fully present. The girl who listened had discovered a truth more enduring than any tale, more powerful than any spoken word, that the world sings constantly, and those who take the time to hear its melodies find themselves woven into its eternal song, carrying its wisdom in their hearts wherever they go. Shadows at dusk. As twilight spilled across the forest, Lyanna felt a strange unease as she stepped onto the familiar path. The evening air was heavier than usual, thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves, but lacking the subtle sweetness of distant blooms she had come to expect. Shadows stretched longer and darker between the trees, and the usual chorus of forest sounds, rustling leaves, distant birdsong, and the hum of insects was muted, subdued, as if the forest itself held its breath. Her footsteps were softer, hesitant, as she followed the winding path toward the tree that had become both teacher and companion. When she arrived at the ancient tree, the first thing she noticed was the glow, or rather, the absence of it. The soft, welcoming shimmer she had grown accustomed to was dim, barely perceptible, fading into the encroaching darkness. Her heart tightened with unease. The tree's branches sagged slightly, and a silence lay over the clearing like a weight. Lyanna knelt at its base, placing her hands on the trunk, feeling the subtle vibrations that had always pulsed beneath her palms. Tonight, they were weak, flickering, as if the tree itself were tired, struggling to maintain the song she had come to cherish. The melody began, but it faltered immediately. The notes wavered, uncertain, and the intricate, layered harmonies she had come to know seemed fractured, incomplete. Lyanna closed her eyes, straining to hear, to feel the song in the deepest recesses of her mind. But it was fragmented, slipping through her fingers like mist. She felt a sharp ache in her chest, as though the song carried not just music, but the tree's very life force. And now that life force trembled in exhaustion. The forest, too, seemed affected. The leaves shivered listlessly, and the usual rustle of creatures moving in the underbrush was absent. Lyanna drew a deep breath, trying to calm the rising fear. The forest had always seemed eternal, resilient, and yet now she realized that even it was fragile. She pressed her forehead against the rough bark, letting herself feel the tree's pulse, weak but still present. In that quiet connection, a whisper entered her mind. Not words, exactly, but an understanding that the melody was fading because the world beyond these woods had begun to forget. Humans, creatures, the passage of time itself, they had grown deaf to the whispers of nature. They no longer paused to notice the wind through the branches, the rhythm of the rain, or the subtle songs carried in the rustling leaves. The realization struck Lyanna with both sorrow and determination. The tree's song was not merely a melody to be enjoyed, but a living chronicle of life, a repository of lessons, a witness to the interconnectedness of all things. And now, its voice was weakening because fewer and fewer were listening. She could feel the echoes of neglect in the branches, in the faltering chords, in the dimming light. The forest itself seemed to mourn, a quiet grief that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Lyanna pressed her hands harder against the trunk, seeking warmth, seeking strength. She felt the subtle tremor of the tree beneath her palms, a heartbeat that was slowing, faltering in a way that spoke of centuries of unheeded songs. Her mind reached out to the melody, tracing the fragments that still lingered, and she began to hum softly, tentatively, letting her own voice flow with the rhythm she remembered from nights past. The notes were imperfect, her timing uncertain, yet as she persisted, she felt the faintest ripple through the branches, a recognition that the tree was listening, responding, connecting once more. The melody shifted slightly, fragile but coherent enough for her to follow. Lyanna realized that the song had always been a conversation, not a performance. It required both the tree and a listener willing to truly attend. She had thought she was only learning, only receiving, yet now she understood her own role. She was a participant, a guardian of the sound, a keeper of the attention the forest demanded. Without heard, those who came before her the song could falter, fade, and eventually vanish, leaving only silence in its place. The twilight deepened further, casting the forest into a palette of blues and purples. Shadows stretched unnaturally, filling corners and crevices, weaving between the trunks in ways that made Lyanna's skin tingle. The music trembled along with the dimming light, carrying an urgency she had never felt before. She began to see visions within the melody, ghosts of children who had once played beneath the tree, families who had rested under its branches, creatures who had found shelter in its roots. Their presence was muted now, ghostly, as if the lack of listeners had dulled their memories. The realization was bitter. The world could forget, and when it did, even the most steadfast guardians of life's stories could weaken. Lyanna rested her cheek against the bark, closing her eyes, and whispered to the tree, "I am listening. I will not forget." Her voice was small, trembling, yet in the quiet, she felt it echo back. The tree shivered faintly, a pulse of recognition that ran up her arms and into her chest. the melody picked up again, not fully restored, but stronger, filled with gratitude and relief that a presence remained to hear it. Lyanna understood that listening was an act of care, and that care could sustain life itself. Even when others failed to attend, she spent the night beneath the tree, leaning against the rough trunk, feeling its slow, steady heartbeat, coaxing the melody back from its faltering edges. The forest around her gradually adjusted, the shadows softening, the leaves stirring as if drawn to her vigilance. Tiny lights flickered along the branches' bioluminescent moss, fireflies, or perhaps fragments of the tree's own glow illuminating the clearing with a gentle shimmer. The song returned gradually, each note steadier than the last, until she could once more feel the full harmony vibrating in the ground beneath her and in the air above. Lyanna realized that the lesson of the night was profound. The song was not eternal without engagement, without attention, without hearts attuned to the subtleties of life. She had believed that the tree's melody was simply there, waiting to be heard, yet it required care, dedication, and presence to endure. It was fragile, yet resilient, depending upon those willing to commit to listening, to remembering, to witnessing. The responsibility weighed on her, but it was a weight she welcomed, knowing that it connected her to something greater than herself, something timeless. As she traced her hands along the bark, she felt an almost imperceptible warmth flowing through her fingers, a current of reassurance and connection. The tree's song was still fading in places, but she knew it could recover, could thrive again, if enough hearts opened to its melody. The forest around her, though shadowed and somber, seemed to lean in, as if aware of her promise, aware that she understood her role. She had become not just a listener, but a guardian, a bridge between the world and the ancient wisdom held in the trees, branches, and roots. The night deepened fully, and the moon rose, casting silver light through the branches. Lyanna sat in quiet contemplation, watching the delicate interplay of light and shadow, of sound and silence. She thought of the villagers, the people who hurried past forests without noticing, who spoke without truly hearing, who lived without attending to the subtle rhythms of the world. The thought made her chest ache, but also strengthened her resolve. She would carry the song beyond the forest, teach others the value of listening, and remind the world that even the smallest whisper of nature carried meaning, beauty, and life. As the hours passed, the melody slowly regained its fullness, the branches lifting slightly as if sighing with relief. Lyanna hummed softly along with it, intertwining her voice with the trees, feeling the harmony settle into a steady, enduring rhythm. She felt the pulse of the forest, the heartbeat of the tree, and the quiet strength of her own attentive presence, all converging into a single, luminous thread of sound. She understood that the song was eternal in potential, yet fragile in practice. It depended on the continuity of care, the constancy of attention, and the willingness of hearts willing to listen by the first light of dawn. The tree glowed faintly, its branches swaying gently in the soft morning breeze. Lyanna rose, brushing leaves from her clothes, and took one last look at the ancient being she had come to love. Its melody was strong once more, yet she knew the shadow of neglect would always threaten it if the world turned away. She carried a deep sense of responsibility as she left the clearing, understanding that her listening mattered not just to her, but to the song itself, to the forest, and to all the lives preserved within the tree's memory. From that day forward, Lyanna returned each evening without fail. She approached the tree with reverence, patience, and care, offering herself as a steadfast witness to its song. She learned to anticipate the subtle falters, the moments when the melody might stumble, and she responded with attention and devotion, coaxing it back into harmony. The forest, too, responded to her vigilance, the shadows retreating slightly, the air softening, and the leaves shimmering with renewed light. Through her presence, the tree's song endured, a testament to the quiet power of listening, caring, and remembering. And Lyanna understood a truth more profound than she had ever known. The world's music, the rustle of leaves, the patter of rain, the whispered voices of creatures and wind, was fragile, yet endlessly precious. Those who listened with heart and intention could sustain it, amplify it, and carry it beyond the forest into the lives of others. The tree had shown her that even in darkness, even when shadows stretched long and the melody faltered, the song could survive with faithful, attentive hearts. Lyanna, the girl who listened, had become more than a visitor. She had become a guardian, a steward, and a bridge between worlds. And as she walked from the forest, feeling the lingering pulse of the tree within her own chest, she knew that the lesson of the evening would stay with her forever. To listen is to honor life. To care is to preserve it. And even the faintest whisper can endure when met with an open heart. The voice of a friend. As twilight descended once more, Lyanna felt a sense of anticipation mingled with a quiet hope. The forest welcomed her like an old companion, the familiar path soft beneath her feet, leaves whispering with each step, moss cushioning her soles, and the air thick with the scent of earth and fading blossoms. She walked more lightly than usual, her heart lifted by the knowledge that the tree's song, though fragile, still lingered. Tonight, she intended something new. She would not only listen, she would respond. The tree stood before her, massive and solemn, its branches swaying with the subtle rhythm of the wind. Its glow was faint but steady, faint pulses of light running through the bark and along the tips of leaves. Lyanna knelt at its base, resting her hands lightly against the rough surface. She felt the familiar hum, the slow vibration of life resonating through her fingertips, and she inhaled deeply, feeling the melody stir within her own chest. Tonight, she would sing. Her voice began softly, a gentle note that blended with the lingering chords of the tree. At first, she hesitated, unsure of the proper rhythm or tone. But as the wind carried her hum into the branches above, the tree responded. Its branches quivered, its glow pulsing in acknowledgement. Encouraged, Lyanna let the melody flow through her, weaving her voice into the complex harmony of leaves, light, and wind. The forest seemed to lean closer, every sound the rustle of distant creatures, the quiet trickle of a hidden stream, the far-off call of a night bird joining the gentle duet she now shared with the tree. The song grew in strength and clarity as she continued. Lyanna's voice, though soft, carried with it the hope she had nurtured in her heart, the hope that the melody might travel beyond the boundaries of the forest, that it could reach ears willing to hear. The tree seemed to respond to her emotion, lifting the tune, weaving her timbre into its own ancient song. A warmth spread from the trunk into her palms, up her arms, and into her chest, a connection that transcended words. The forest had become a living instrument, and together they played a symphony, both delicate and profound. Lyanna felt the forest breathe around her, each note of the tree's song, intertwined with her own, carried subtle stories, fragments of lives, moments of joy and sorrow, whispers of creatures that had once passed beneath its boughs. But now, infused with her voice, the music seemed to take on a new dimension. It carried intention, hope, and the promise of renewal. The melody, once faltering and dim, began to strengthen. Pulses of light in the branches brightening, as if infused with her own courage and care as she sang. Lyanna imagined the far-off villages beyond the forest, places she had seen only in glimpses from distant hills. She pictured people living busy, distracted lives, unaware of the subtle symphonies that surrounded them. She poured her intention into the song, sending it outward, letting her voice carry the longing for connection, the need to awaken hearts to the quiet wonders of the world. Somewhere beyond the hills, across rivers and fields, the melody might stir curiosity, might draw attention to what had been forgotten. The tree's song intertwined with hers, shaping and amplifying her notes. She could feel the history embedded in its music, the voices of countless generations, the hum of life preserved within its bark, responding to her presence. There was a rhythm now, a dialogue between her and the ancient being, a shared understanding that the world's song could endure if hearts were willing to participate. The melody shifted, carrying subtle hints of guidance, patience, compassion, the recognition that even small acts of attention could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond immediate reach. Hours passed as she sang, her voice blending seamlessly with the tree, rising and falling with the gentle cadence of leaves brushing against one another. She felt herself transformed, no longer merely a listener, but a participant, a bridge between the forest and the distant world. With each note, she imagined the echoes reaching the villages, children pausing in doorways, elders listening with curiosity, animals lifting ears to catch the faint resonance of the forest. She imagined the song weaving through homes, markets, and fields, reminding all who heard it that the world itself carried voices worth attending to. The glow in the tree intensified gradually, suffusing the clearing with a soft, golden light. Lyanna opened her eyes and saw the branches quivering in delicate rhythm, tiny motes of light hovering like fireflies, responding to the music. The forest had become a sanctuary of sound and light, a place where melody and intention converged. Lyanna understood that her voice had become part of the tree's song, that together they had amplified its reach beyond the forest's edge. The faltering notes of nights past were replaced by a resilient, radiant harmony that pulsed with life and possibility. As the night deepened, she felt subtle movements in the distant shadows that shifted, rustlings in the underbrush, distant glimpses of animals stirred by the renewed energy. The song had awakened more than the tree. It had reawakened the forest itself. Lyanna laughed softly, a sound that carried with her voice into the melody, mingling seamlessly with the tree's harmony. She felt the resonance of joy, hope, and attentiveness spread outward, understanding that even in darkness, the light of care and listening could travel, reaching places she might never see, but which existed nonetheless. She imagined villagers in distant homes, perhaps hearing faint echoes of the melody in the quiet moments before sleep. The song was subtle, delicate, but insistent. A mother tucking her child into bed might pause to notice the rustling of wind in the trees outside. A shepherd tending distant fields might hear a faint tune on the breeze and lift his gaze in wonder. Each echo was a seed planted, carrying the possibility of renewed attention, of remembering the voices that nature had always held close. Lyanna poured her heart into each note, her song intertwined with the ancient memories embedded in the tree, giving the melody wings to travel beyond the forest. As dawn approached, the clearing was filled with a soft luminescence, not solely from the tree, but from the energy of the combined song. Lyanna felt exhaustion in her limbs, yet her spirit was buoyed by the knowledge of what she had accomplished. The melody was stronger than it had ever been, carrying hope, light, and the promise of connection into the world. She pressed her cheek against the tree one last time, feeling its pulse steady beneath her, and whispered her gratitude into the leaves and branches. The tree shivered in response, and she understood that it, too, recognized the transformation. Together, they had created something enduring. She rose slowly, stepping back to admire the full presence of the tree and the forest. The shadows of night mingled with the first hints of morning, yet the clearing glowed softly with a warmth that seemed to defy the fading darkness. Lyanna knew that her voice, gentle and persistent, had joined the tree's eternal song, amplifying it, nurturing it, carrying it to ears willing to hear. The forest around her, once shadowed and fragile, now thrummed with renewed life, its branches swaying in rhythm, leaves rustling in quiet celebration, and the wind carrying threads of melody outward into the world. Lyanna walked back along the path with her heart lifted, hearing the echo of the song in her own steps. She imagined the distant villages, the faces of people pausing to notice, listening, remembering, even if only briefly. Each faint echo was a testament to the power of attention and care, of courage and intention. The tree's song had become more than a melody. It had become a bridge, a beacon, a living invitation to the world to remember the importance of listening with the heart. And though she returned each evening, she no longer felt alone. The forest, the tree, and the echoes of her song created a community, invisible but tangible. Every note carried her presence, every vibration her care, every shimmer of light, a reminder that attention and intention could preserve beauty even in a world grown distracted. She had discovered that to listen and respond, to offer one's own voice to the eternal song, was the highest form of devotion, the truest way to keep the melody alive. Lyanna understood that she could not save the world in a single night, but she could plant seeds. She could nurture attention, care, and presence, spreading the melody slowly, letting it grow where it could. And in this, she found a joy deeper than any she had known, the knowledge that her song, however gentle, had become part of something vast, timeless, and infinitely beautiful. As the moon rose high above the treetops, Lyanna sat once more beneath the glowing branches. The melody swelled around her, a rich, radiant tapestry of sound and light, intertwined with her voice, her care, and her attention. The forest hummed in harmony, the distant echoes stretching toward the villages beyond, carrying hope and the reminder that the world's song was alive wherever someone was willing to listen. Lyanna, the girl who had learned to hear, had now become the girl who sang back, offering her heart to the tree, the forest, and the world beyond. The forest of singing twilight. Twilight settled over the forest with a gentle hush, the kind that draped itself like a soft veil over the earth. Lyanna walked along the familiar path, her steps lighter now, carrying the quiet confidence that comes from understanding one's purpose. The air was alive with the faint hum of anticipation, a subtle vibration that resonated in her chest and seemed to guide her toward the ancient tree. Tonight felt different, more vibrant, more alive yet. She could sense the delicate balance that still held the forest's song together. When she arrived at the tree, it greeted her with a glow brighter than she had ever seen, pulses of golden light flowing along its bark, threading through its branches like veins of living melody. The tree's song rose, not faltering as before, but clear, rich, and resonant, filling the clearing with warmth. Lyanna pressed her hands against the trunk, feeling the vibration surge through her palms, her arms, and into her chest. The hum carried a joyful intensity, a celebration of life restored, and for the first time, she noticed a subtle change. Other trees nearby, smaller and often overlooked, began to shimmer faintly, their leaves quivering as if drawn into the same rhythm. She blinked, astonished. The tree was no longer singing alone. The forest itself was awakening. A gentle breeze swept through the clearing, and with it, the tiny trees and saplings began to join in, each contributing its own voice to the larger melody. The rustle of leaves became a chorus, harmonizing with the deep tones of the ancient tree. Twigs and branches lifted slightly, resonating in synchrony, creating layers of sound that were both delicate and profound. The entire forest had become an orchestra, a sanctuary of song, alive with the music of life itself. Lyanna knelt at the base of the great tree, her eyes wide with wonder, her heart swelling with the realization of what she had helped bring forth. The melody was no longer a single voice. It was a symphony of light and life, each note echoing through the clearing, the branches, the leaves, and even the soil beneath her feet. She felt the pulse of countless lives intertwining, the quiet hum of animals, the whisper of water moving through roots, the gentle wind through every leaf, and understood that the song was no longer just the trees, it was the forests. Her voice rose, tentative at first, blending with the resonating chords of the awakening trees. The sound traveled upward, intertwining with the hum of branches and leaves, shaping the music, giving it form and amplifying its power. Lyanna's melody was gentle yet insistent, a thread of humanity woven into the ancient song of nature. She realized then that this was her gift: to listen, to understand, and to share the forest's music, bringing it outward into the world so that others might also hear and remember. The forest responded to her presence, each tree adding its own unique timbre, each leaf contributing to the harmony. Tiny sparks of bioluminescence flickered along branches, as if the melody carried light as well as sound. The canopy shimmered with colors she had never seen, subtle shifts in greens, golds, and soft blues, moving in time with the rhythm. Shadows danced and intertwined with the glowing branches, creating intricate patterns on the forest floor, patterns that seemed to mirror the melody in visual form. Lyanna felt a profound connection, not just to the ancient tree, but to every living thing around her. The forest was alive in a way she had never imagined, vibrant with the collective voice of centuries, and she was part of it. As she sang, visions unfolded in the glow of twilight. She saw children laughing and dancing beneath the trees, their footsteps adding soft percussion to the symphony. She glimpsed distant villages, rooftops shimmering in the last light of day, and imagined the faint echoes of the forest's song reaching ears attuned to its subtle beauty. Animals stirred in the underbrush, lifting heads, pausing to listen, and she felt their attention join the music, their lives becoming threads in the ever-expanding tapestry of sound. The melody was a living record, a celebration of all that had been and all that was yet to come. Lyanna's mind embraced the profound truth she had been discovering through these evenings, that listening and responding were not acts of passive observation, but of active creation. The song had needed her presence, her care, her voice, to fully awaken the forest. And now, the forest needed her to carry it further, beyond the trees, beyond the path, beyond the shadows of twilight. She felt a deep responsibility, but also a deep joy, knowing that she could act as a conduit, letting the world partake in the beauty and wisdom of the forest's eternal song. The branches of the great tree stretched higher, lifting toward the sky, as if in celebration. The smaller trees around it swayed in time, their leaves producing a gentle chorus that intertwined with the steady, resonant tones of the ancient trunk. Lyanna moved among them, placing her hands lightly on the bark of each, feeling the subtle vibrations of life that had awakened in response to her voice. She hummed in harmony, sometimes high, sometimes low, letting her tone shift and merge with each tree's unique voice. In this communion, she discovered the boundless complexity of life, the interconnectedness of every living being, and the infinite beauty of attentiveness. The forest's song grew richer, a layered symphony that seemed to tell stories of ancient days, of seasons passing, of lives beginning and ending, of creatures thriving and resting, of rivers flowing and wind whispering. Lyanna felt each story as she sang along, a thread of empathy weaving her heart with the melody of the world. She understood that music was not merely sound but a vessel for memory, for connection, for understanding. Through it, the past, present, and future converged in a single, living moment of harmony. As night fell fully, fireflies flickered through the air, tiny sparks dancing in response to the song. The glow of the trees intensified, their branches bending slightly as if bowing to the harmony, and Lyanna felt a deep peace settle over her. The forest had become a sanctuary of life and light, and in this space, she recognized her role not as a lone observer, but as a participant, a guardian, a teacher, and a messenger. Her gift was not just to hear, but to share, to bring attention and care to the world beyond, carrying the lessons and beauty of the forest wherever she went. She imagined the song traveling outward, carried by wind, by birds, by the subtle currents of air and light, reaching villages, towns, and cities beyond the forest. The faint echoes might stir curiosity, awaken forgotten attentiveness, and invite others to pause and notice the world's quiet symphonies. Even a single listener could help the melody persist, and with each heart opened, the song's reach would expand, growing stronger and more vibrant. Lyanna understood that her voice, joined with the forest, could spark this change, and she sang with renewed purpose, infusing hope, care, and intention into every note. The night deepened, yet the forest remained alive with light and sound, a living tapestry of song and presence. Lyanna moved back to the ancient tree, pressing her cheek to the glowing bark, feeling the pulse of life beneath her. Its glow now intertwined with hers, their energies flowing together in perfect rhythm. She felt a quiet pride, a sense of accomplishment, and an even deeper awareness of the fragility and resilience of life. The forest had been silent, nearly forgotten, but through patience, attention, and love, it had awakened again she had been a part of that miracle. Hours passed unnoticed as she sang and listened, her voice now fully integrated into the symphony. She felt the energy of every living thing vibrating through her, a reminder that even in the vastness of the world, attention and care could create tangible, beautiful change. The trees around her shimmered in response, and the melody flowed upward into the sky, carrying the forest's song beyond the reach of immediate vision. It was a music of light, life, and eternity, and Lyanna understood that she would continue to share it, spreading hope, connection, and attentiveness wherever her path took her, as the first hints of dawn painted the horizon. The glow of the forest remained, softer now, yet persistent. Lyanna stood, brushing moss and leaves from her clothes, her heart full with understanding. The song had become more than the tree, more than herself, more than the forest. It was a living network of sound, light, and memory, strengthened by attention and care. She felt a quiet certainty that it would endure, and that she would continue to nurture it, guiding it outward into the world, helping others to hear what had been nearly forgotten. Lyanna turned from the clearing with one last look at the ancient tree and the forest, now alive with song. The branches shimmered in the twilight, 1,000 voices humming in harmony, and she knew that her gift, her purpose, was to carry this music beyond the shadows, into the hearts of those who had forgotten how to listen. And in that moment, she felt the profound truth of all she had learned. The world sings, endlessly and beautifully, and those willing to hear, to participate, and to share, become part of a song that will never truly end. Thank you for joining me tonight, beneath the branches of the tree that sang at twilight. May its song carry with you into your dreams, bringing peace, comfort, and gentle rest. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to subscribe to Whispers of the Night, where more tales of calm and wonder await. Until next time, sleep well and good night.